So in college, I used to follow a very specific diet, and I don't mean specific in that I ate the same thing every day, just specific in the fact that it was very bad. Now, a common day for me might be starting off with me getting a cinnamon roll from the vending machine. I would get a Mountain Dew because those two things go incredible together, right? Breakfast of champions, and I'm ready to face my first round of classes. For lunch, it was either Chick-fil-A, a burger, a fried chicken wrap, all with a side of fries. I love French fries. Now dinner, I would really mix it up. Usually would be in the school cafeteria, and it might have more of an international vibe, like chicken fried rice, a burrito bowl, or some pad thai. And then around midnight, my friends and I would grab a fourth meal to fuel up for writing an essay that was due the next day. Pizza, or of course, Taco Bell, the king of the fourth meal. Are you hungry yet, just listening to me talk about this? But yeah, for me, college, this is 4 square meals. Most of them deep fried, glazed, tossed in MSG. The fact that I'm still alive is a miracle. But that's college for you, right? For most people, eating terrible is just a part of their experience. And again, not everybody, but for a lot of people who are just trying to survive and make their way through. Now, the thing is that even though I ate whatever I wanted in college, I inevitably would get a serious case of food remorse or food regret. It's like I'd be tired or sluggish, or I'd have heartburn, or I'd be nauseous. One day, and I sometimes actually regret this, I watched a documentary about a guy who decided to do a crazy experiment and only eat fast food for 1 month. And some of you may have seen that documentary. Every meal, and let's just say that after 30 days, this guy was not ready to compete in the Olympics. He was a mess. In fact, during that month of madness, he visited a doctor who basically said, hey, if you don't stop this human science project, you're going to die. My first thought when I saw this was, this is actually a documentary of my life. I'm pretty sure a doctor would tell me right now, if I didn't change some things I was doing for as far as what I was eating, I was going to die. So I knew, oh my goodness, it's time for me to change my diet. So I decided to incorporate vegetables into my meals, because apparently tomatoes and ketchup, they don't really count as vegetables. But have you eaten vegetables? Now, I know some of you are watching this and you love vegetables, okay? But for the rest of you, have you eaten vegetables? Like, they do not taste like spicy chicken sandwiches from Chick-fil-A. Not at all. They don't taste like waffle fries. Broccoli and waffle fries taste very different from each other. So even though I knew I needed to make some diet changes, I was not excited to actually make those changes. Now, let me just put your mind at ease real quick. This sermon isn't about what you choose to eat, okay? It's not about that. It's about the fact that if you're anything like me, there are some things in your life that could use changing. And you know, you may feel like I did when it was time for me to change my diet, about those things in your life that you need to change. Like for you, maybe it's school. Maybe you know your geometry grade could use some improving, but you also know that that's going to require more time studying and less time playing video games. And you know that if you dial down the gaming, you're going to miss out on time with your friends. Or maybe you need to get serious about practice, whether it's soccer, band, or debate club, or whatever you're involved in, something that involves you practicing in your own time or on your free time, or even giving it more effort while you're there. And you know that probably with some more work, you could take things to the next level, or you could improve a little bit, but it's just, you don't want to, or it's just so overwhelming to think about. Or maybe it's a little more real. Maybe it's about a friend who isn't the best influence on you, but you've known him or her since preschool. And if you pull away from your friends or your group of friends, it will affect your entire group dynamic. It's just gonna feel strange. Maybe it's about the words that you use when you talk to others. You're always the funny one in class with the quickest comebacks, but you're also the one who can sometimes hurt people with your words or with your quick wit. Yeah, you're funny, and while you get the laughs, you're starting to think that, man, there may be some piece of this that needs to change. Maybe it's an addiction or habit that's hurting you or other people, or it's just a bad choice that you make over and over and over, and you just think, yeah, something in my life needs to change. We all have something that needs to change. But no matter what the issue is, no matter the change, there's a common thread that runs through every situation when it comes to making a change. It's easy usually to see that we need to do something, but it's really difficult to actually do what needs to be done. The easy part of this is saying, yeah, there's something I need to change. I need to change in this area or that area. That's the easy part of this. Then when it comes to actually making change, now we're getting to the difficult side of that. Why is that? Like, if we know we need to make a change and that change is for the good and it benefits us and sometimes benefits other people, then why don't we just do it? Well, I think there are a few reasons why this is so challenging. First, we're afraid to fail. Like, this is universal. No one ever wants to fail. And if the past is any indicator, we are going to fail. So it's like, okay, I want to make a change in this area, but I've tried before and I've failed. And I'm afraid of failing again because nobody likes to fail. That's number one. Number two, we're afraid to stand out. For some of us, it's easier to just roll with the B average or be the second chair, be the extra number 3 in the school play instead of being the lead actor. Like, we want to care, but not too much. We like attention, but we don't necessarily want the wrong kind of attention. We don't want to be seen as someone who tries too hard or someone who, is trying to make other people look bad. So we keep doing what we've always done so we don't draw attention to ourselves. Number 3, we don't want to seem judgmental. Like, if we start changing certain behaviors or attitude, we're worried that people will think that we think we're too good for them because they haven't changed. Like, let's say your group of guy friends talks a certain way about girls, and you decide, you know what, I don't feel comfortable talking that way about girls anymore. But if I change this, all of a sudden I risk looking weird or judgmental when I'm around my group of friends. Plus, there's a chance that they won't think they can be themselves around me. And is there any win in this situation? You see what I'm saying there? Nobody wants to feel that way. And finally, we don't attempt change because it seems overwhelming. Between school, homework, cheerleading practice, your part-time job, anything more seems exhausting to think about. Working on something to make your life better just seems like a whole lot of trouble. Now that I've thoroughly depressed everyone, I actually have some good news. Making a change is possible, and it can benefit you even beyond the actual change itself. Now, just give me a minute today. We're going to look at a passage of scripture from a letter written by James to kind of talk through this. James was the half-brother of Jesus, but he didn't always believe Jesus was the Son of God. And that's fair. We all get that. It's tough to believe that kind of claim when you share a bedroom or a house with that person as a kid. When your sibling's like, hey, I'm God, you're like, okay, gotcha, sure, yeah. But after Jesus died and then came back to life, James knew Jesus really was God's son. And he soon became a prominent leader in the early group of Jesus followers, which is a pretty cool backstory to all of this. But before we get to what he said in his letter, let me give you a little background. During one of Jesus' last talks with his followers, he told them that they would be his witnesses in their hometown and beyond. And they would take his message of grace and forgiveness and the gospel to the very ends of the earth. And so Jesus was telling them to make a change, to move beyond and outside of their comfort zones and into the world. Now, this was a big vision, obviously, that could make a big impact. But at first, that didn't happen. Jesus' followers were on board with the gospel. But the idea of carrying that message around the world, that's intimidating, right? So most of them just said, you know what, I'm gonna stay right where I am. And then something changed. The early Christians started to be persecuted for their beliefs. Some were even being put to death. And this crackdown on the church caused people to scatter from their city and homes, which is exactly what Jesus had told them to do in the first place. So this dramatic change in their lives actually propelled them to share the gospel in new places while also growing their faith and dependence on God. Because all of a sudden, okay, our lives are in danger, we have to scatter, and we're so dependent on God right now, and that's how the message began to spread. And this is what was happening in the world when James wrote to new Jewish Christians in his letter. And one of the things he said was this: dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. And we're like, okay, let's just hold on for just a second. Consider it joy when you experience trouble. Like, that sounds crazy, especially because this wasn't just any kind of trouble. Like, yeah, maybe I could experience joy even though I'm having car trouble or something like that. But these people who are reading this, they could be put to death for what they believe. So that just seems crazy. But James isn't even finished. Check out what he says next. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. We're all familiar with endurance, but we usually associate that word with athletics, right? When we train and push past our limits, over time our bodies will acclimate to meet those new limits. It's why people who can, run marathons, they have a lot of endurance. You may struggle to bench a certain weight, but eventually it becomes easier. You have some endurance in that area. Then you need to add more weight, which challenges you to grow even stronger. So you see how that works. Well, James' words mean endurance isn't just for the gym, it works in every area of life. See, when we push through the pain and struggle of any kind, including the struggle of change, we don't just become better at that specific thing, we develop personal endurance. We develop an inner strength that can help us in other areas. It can help us with other challenges. So James then says this, so let it, meaning your endurance, grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Essentially, James is saying that practice makes perfect, right? In other words, pushing through the pain and the difficult stuff in life, enduring through that, it doesn't just make you better at the thing you're working on, but you actually learn how to change. It's like you're developing a muscle of endurance that will help you when you face any kind of change. You're developing the muscle of change, the ability to change. And when you have this perspective, every change you face is another opportunity to grow. Not just personally, but spiritually as well. So really, think of it this way. God can change the way you see change. God can actually change the way you look at and view and approach change. Because when it comes to change, our tendency, I know this is my tendency, is to focus on all the negative parts, all the trouble that's gonna come along with it, all the things that I don't wanna do, all the, the difficult energy I'm gonna have to muster up to do those things or change those things. But when we see change as something that has a trickle-down effect into every other area of our lives, we see that it's more about becoming better, overall better, than it is about us being uncomfortable. When we view change this way, the way God does, we recognize that it's all about growth. It's a positive thing. It's a good thing. It's a healthy thing. It's an awesome thing because it's about growing as a person, a friend, a son, a daughter. It's about getting stronger and tougher. It's about developing better character. It's about strengthening your faith. And I realized, man, just talking about this doesn't get everybody excited about, tackling goals and improving grades and exercising. Like we've already said, it's a tough sell for all of us. But it probably felt that way for the readers of James' letter as well. Keep in mind, they were trying to avoid being murdered for their faith. But James is telling them that when we trust who God is and what God is like, we can be sure that God is doing something in us, for us, no matter how uncomfortable the change may be. So whatever we have to do to endure and persevere through the change, it's worth it. It's worth it because there's a bigger picture that God is painting in our lives and for our futures. And this is so huge for you to get at the stage of life you're in. Because even though change is absolutely challenging for you right now, and it certainly is, and I don't want to minimize that, it will only grow more challenging as you get older. Life doesn't become simpler once you graduate high school. It doesn't become simpler once you move out and finish college one day or step into a career. It just gets more complex. Like you'll exchange schoolwork for a career. You might exchange dating for marriage. You might exchange your family now for a family of your own one day. And it will just be different. It will be more complex in a lot of different ways. But the strength that you develop now will be the strength that you take with you into your future. So when you pursue endurance now in the face of change, you'll be better prepared for even bigger challenges in your future. And ultimately, developing personal endurance will build and deepen your faith. So I want to just encourage you to do the very thing that we've talked about today. Change the way you see change. Change the way you see change. Here's what I'm asking you to do this week. I'm asking you to change your perspective on the things in front of you. That thing that you know needs to change, I'm asking you to see it as an opportunity to grow your faith, to grow your endurance, to grow your character. So instead of saying, oh man, I'm working hard to change this one thing, I need to change this one thing, say, I'm working hard to become a person who knows how to change things. I'm working hard on developing the strength and muscle of change. Hey, maybe even tell a few of your friends, or maybe your parents, or maybe your small group leader about the change you want to make, and ask them to encourage you. It's so powerful to have people who give us encouragement and give us perspective and help us readjust our perspective when we need it. So hey, invite others into the change process, and I think you'll be amazed at how much that can speed things up. But as we head out today, I want you to pick one area that you think needs to change, or you believe God is calling you to change, and then change the way you see it. Decide you'll at least begin to think about it differently. Decide to think of it not as changing what you do, but as working on who you are and who you will become. And trust God to help you get there, because He, after all, He wants you to live the best life possible. He wants so many good things for you. And as you trust Him in this area, you may just find the part of your life that feels impossible to change, well, that part is actually subject to change.